Tell us what $40 means to you. If you tweet it, use the hashtag $40. Call, tweet, write your congressman, write your senators.
We'll leave the last minute of the President's remarks to go live now to the U.S. House.
Don't let taxes go up.
Prayer will be offered by our chaplain, Father Conroy.
Let us pray. Loving God, we give you thanks for giving us another day. As we meditate on all the blessings of life, we especially pray for the blessing of peace in our lives and in our world. Our fervent prayer, O God, is that people will learn to live together in reconciliation and respect, so that the terrors of war and of dictatorial abuse will be no more. As you have created each person, we pray that you would guide our hearts and minds, that every person of every place and background might focus on your great gift of life and so learn to live in unity. May your special blessings be upon the members of this assembly in the important, sometimes difficult work they do. Give them wisdom and charity that they might work together for the common good. May all that is done this day in the people's house be for your greater honor and glory. Amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. For what purpose does the gentlewoman rise?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 1, Rule 1, I demand a vote on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal.
The question is on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal. Those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. The journal stands approved.
Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from North Carolina seek recognition?
On that, I demand the yeas and the nays.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will please rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson.
Everyone, including our guests in the gallery, please join in. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Chair will entertain requests for one-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the President released his budget for 2013, which calls for a cut in defense spending for the first time since 1998 by almost $500 billion. It is clear the President is simply taking resources away from our military capabilities and using the funds to grow the size of government to promote more unsustainable domestic programs, putting senior citizens at risk of a devalued dollar and burdening young people and college students with crushing debt. Instead of focusing on stopping defense cuts, sequestration, the President is putting our national security at risk and our allies in jeopardy during a time of international instability. Cutting our defense budget with record-breaking tax increases destroying jobs will not reduce the national deficit, but only represents a diversion of funds. I urge the President to recognize the primary function of the national government is national defense, to provide peace through strength. In conclusion, God bless our troops, and we will never forget September 11th and the global war on terrorism.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Maryland rise? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the 3 million seniors represented by the Alliance for Retired Americans, I rise with my Democratic colleagues to accept their Valentine for our vote to improve Medicare under the health care reform law. Our seniors deserve love, care, and support every day, but today, on a day when people all across the country are celebrating with their loved ones, let us stand together and show our appreciation to the more than 47 million seniors who make up the fabric of our country. In my state of Maryland, the Affordable Care Act is already working to provide more than 70,000 seniors with preventive care benefits and offer 50% discount for prescription drugs to nearly 4,000 beneficiaries who entered the Medicare Part D donut hole. The Ryan budget, lauded by Republicans, would replace Medicare with an inefficient voucher plan and increase the out-of-pocket costs of Maryland seniors by more than $6,800 in the first year alone. And while they charge the health reform bill cut to Medicare, Republicans failed to admit that they adopted in their plan the same $500 billion in cuts, actually cost savings, included in the health care reform law. So I stand with my colleagues to assure seniors we'll protect Medicare today and in the future. And for all of those seniors I visited this morning, happy Valentine's Day.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise?
Address the House, rise and extend.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, today on Valentine's Day, millions of Americans will celebrate with a box of chocolates or candy. All told, consumers are expected to spend more than $1.5 billion on candy this holiday. What they don't know is that government sugar controls are making that heart-shaped box more expensive than it needs to be. What they don't know is that American companies are struggling to compete against foreign producers who pay half as much for sugar. Because of government price supports, marketing allotments, and import quotas, U.S. consumers and businesses pay almost double the average world market price for sugar. By some estimates, this could be costing us more than 20,000 jobs. Many of us have watched good jobs lost because of government guarantees the profits of a relatively small group of growers and producers. Reforming our sugar program isn't a partisan issue, which is why I've been proud to introduce H.R. 1385, the Free Market Sugar Act, with my friend from Chicago, Danny Davis. Maybe next Valentine's Day can be sweeter for American workers and consumers. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, in 2010, the Affordable Care Act delivered a $250 check to seniors in my district who are struggling to cover the gap between the cost of their prescription drugs and their Medicare coverage. In 2011, these same seniors benefited from an average savings of $248 on their medication. For my well-meaning Republican colleagues who say health reform is hurting Medicare beneficiaries, I ask them to imagine spending 2 and 3 times that amount on prescription drugs per month. For most seniors, $648 is a significant savings, and it is just the beginning. The Affordable Care Act will provide more efficient care by bundling Medicare services, investing in our health care workforce, and focusing on quality. Replacing Medicare with vouchers would erase the progress we've already made toward prescription drug coverage and lead to fewer choices for beneficiaries. I encourage my colleagues to work with me on solutions that guarantee continued access to health care for our seniors. I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Rise and address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, today I want to acknowledge a colleague, fellow Texan, a veteran, and a true American hero. Congressman Sam Johnson served in the United States Air Force for 29 years. During service, he flew 62 combat missions in the Korean War and 25 missions in Vietnam. While flying his 25th Vietnam combat mission, Congressman Johnson was shot down and captured in North Vietnam. On February 12, 1973, after 7 years of imprisonment, Congressman Johnson was returned to the United States and reunited with his wife and daughters. This week we honor Congressman Johnson and celebrate the 39th anniversary of his homecoming. Through the years of agony, he persevered, and he left Vietnam with the resolution to support every man and every woman fighting for the United States of America. Mr. Speaker, we are all called to office for different reasons. For members of my class 10 years ago, it was the tragic events of September 11th. For Congressman Johnson, it was his imprisonment that empowered him to run for office. It is an honor to celebrate a man who has given not only part of his life to protect our freedoms, but a man who continues to represent the American people with dignity and respect. Thank you, Congressman Johnson, for your service to our nation. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from American Samoa rise?
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to extend and revise my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the housing crisis plunged our economy into a recession that we are still struggling to overcome. Home ownership is at the heart of the American dream, and yet over 10 million American families now owe more than their home than what it's worth. President Obama recently announced a plan that would give homeowners the chance to save hundreds monthly and approximately $3,000 yearly on their mortgages by refinancing at historically low interest rates. Under President Obama's plan, the administration would also expand the eligibility for the Home Affordable Modification Program to borrowers with higher debt loans. It would also triple incentives paid to banks to reduce principal on loans and help borrowers rebuild equity. In addition to these proposals, the administration is also extending HAMP to December 2013 to help responsible homeowners lower their costs and stay in their homes. Mr. Speaker, I thank President Obama for his proposal that would provide much-needed relief for millions of American families, and I thank the President for his leadership and his commitment to helping American families move forward, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Mr. Speaker, I request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the Supreme Court will soon take up the President's nationalized health care law. This case will go down in history as it affects every American. But unless every citizen has a seat inside the Supreme Court, they will not be able to watch the legal arguments or hear the questions by the justices. The people will not be able to see justice in action. The American public should be able to view the proceedings on TV, much like they do with C-SPAN when Congress is in session. I know cameras can be placed in a courtroom without disruption because I was one of the first judges in Texas to allow an unobtrusive camera in the courtroom. I did so without any problem and proved the cynics wrong. A lack of seating capacity is no reason to deny the American public access to the Supreme Court. The American people deserve an all-access pass to watch the High Court in action. The Supreme Court is the most important court in the world. Let the world know what takes place behind those closed doors. Let cameras and the people in. And that's just the way it is. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York rise?
Speaker, I request to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the President assured American seniors that under his health care package, their insurance plans would not be affected and that they would have the same health care choices as before the law. Sadly, Mr. Speaker, this is not the case. The President's health care law makes drastic cuts to the popular Medicare Advantage program by more than $136 billion. With these cuts, Mr. Speaker, Medicare Advantage plans will be forced to make significant adjustments, including reductions in what they cover. Those reductions will limit seniors' ability to choose the Medicare plan that best suits them. It is important to note, Mr. Speaker, that the cuts will hit low-income seniors and the disabled with disproportionate cuts. About 70% of the cuts will be imposed on those with incomes below $32,400 per year. The President's cuts will give the 120,000 seniors in my district who choose Medicare Advantage few choices and increased costs. Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to work with me to protect Medicare Advantage. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Washington rise?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to address the question that is on the minds of every senior in America. And that question is, what is the future of Medicare? And what is this Congress doing to protect it? The President's budget, which was released just yesterday, fails to address the inevitable bankruptcy this program faces. His budget includes a record budget deficit. His budget also includes over $2 trillion in tax increases that will not only destroy jobs, but do nothing to protect the future of Medicare. We know that Obamacare cut $500 billion out of Medicare. And now the President, in his budget, is asking for more than $360 billion in additional cuts. The President's health care bill is destroying a program that was designed to protect seniors. It's limiting access, increasing cost, and lowering quality care. According to the American Medical Association, 1 out of 3 doctors already limits the number of Medicare patients they see. Just try to find a doctor in Eastern Washington who will take a new Medicare patient. This is unacceptable. We can do better, and we must do better. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from North Carolina rise?
I seek permission for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's interesting that our colleagues across the aisle are doing their best to hide the truth about the cuts to Medicare that came with Obamacare and those that the President has recommended in his budget. However, the truth will out. The President's health care takeover, like his latest budget, is bad for our nation's seniors. According to the Congressional Budget Office, the Democrats' health care and tax increase law slashed funding for Medicare Advantage plans used by millions of seniors across the country. According to an October Forbes article, the average beneficiary, considering both those who stay in the stripped-down Medicare Advantage program and those who transition out of it, will incur an average cut of more than $3,700 in benefits per year by 2017. That will directly affect the 40,000 seniors in my mostly rural North Carolina district who enjoy Medicare Advantage plans. So much for the President's promise that, quote, if you like your plan, you can keep it. That's just another reason why I voted against the health care law and continue to support its repeal. I yield back.
The chair lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable, the Speaker, House of Representatives, sir. Pursuant to the permission granted in Clause 2H of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, the clerk received the following message from the Secretary of the Senate on February 14, 2012 at 10:25 a.m. that the Senate pass without amendment H.R. 1162. With best wishes, I am, signed sincerely, Karen L. Haas.
The chair lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable, the Speaker, House of Representatives, sir. Pursuant to the permission granted in Clause 2H of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, I have the honor to transmit a sealed envelope received from the White House on February 13, 2012 at 2:14 p.m. and said to contain a message from the President whereby he submits his budget for the United States government for fiscal year 2013. With best wishes, I am, signed sincerely, Karen L. Haas, Clerk of the House.
The clerk will read the message.
To the Congress of the United States. America was built on the idea that anyone who is willing to work hard and play by the rules can make it if they try, no matter where they started out. By giving every American a fair shot, asking everyone to do their fair share, and ensuring that everyone played by the same rules, we built the great American middle class and made our country a model for the world. Today, America is still home to the world's best universities, most productive workers, and most innovative companies. But for many Americans, the basic bargain at the heart of the American dream has eroded. Long before this recession hit, there was a widespread feeling that hard work had stopped paying off, that fewer and fewer of those who contributed to the success of our economy actually benefited from that success. Those at the very top grew wealthier while everyone else struggled with paychecks that did not keep up with the rising cost of everything from college tuition to groceries. And as a result, too many families found themselves taking on more and more debt just to keep up, often papered over by mounting credit card bills and home equity loans. Then, in the middle of 2008, the house of cards collapsed. Too many mortgages had been sold to people who could not afford or even understand them. Banks had packaged too many risky loans into securities and then sold them to investors who were misled or misinformed about the risk involved. Huge bets had been made and huge bonuses had been paid out with other people's money. And the regulators who were supposed to prevent the crisis either looked the other way or did not have the authority to act. In the end, this growing debt and irresponsibility helped trigger the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. Combined with new tax cuts and new mandatory programs that had never been paid for, it threw our country into a deep fiscal hole, and millions of hardworking Americans lost their jobs, their homes, and their basic economic security. Today, we are seeing signs that our economy is on the mend, but we are not out of the woods yet. Instead, we are facing a make-or-break moment for the middle class and for all those who are fighting to get there. What is at stake is whether or not this will be a country where working people can earn enough to raise a family, build modest savings, own a home, and secure their retirement. This is the defining issue of our time. This budget reflects my deep belief that we must rise to meet this moment, both for our economy and for the millions of Americans who have worked so hard to get ahead. We built this budget around the idea that our country has always done the best when everyone gets a fair shot, everyone does their fair share, and everyone plays by the same rules. It rejects the your own economics that have led to the widening gap between the richest and the poorest Americans that undermines both our belief in equal opportunity and the engine of our economic growth. When the middle class is shrinking and families can no longer afford to buy the goods and services that businesses are selling, it drags down our entire economy. And countries with less inequality tend to have stronger and steadier economic growth over the long run. The way to rebuild our economy and strengthen the middle class is to make sure that everyone in America gets a fair shot at success. Instead of lowering our standards and our sights, we need to win a race to the top for good jobs that pay well and offer security for the middle class. To succeed and thrive in the global high-tech economy, we need America to be a place with the highest skilled, highest educated workers, the most advanced transportation and communication networks, and the strongest commitment to research and technology in the world. This budget makes investments that can help America win this race, create good jobs, and lead the world economy. And it does so with the understanding that we need an economy that is no longer burdened by years of debt and in which everyone shoulders their fair share to put our fiscal house in order. When I took office 3 years ago, my administration was left with an annual deficit of $1.3 trillion, or 9.2% of GDP, and a projected 10-year deficit of more than $8 trillion. These deficits were the result of a previous 8 years of undertaking initiatives but not paying for them, especially 2 large tax cuts and a new Medicare prescription drug benefit, as well as the financial crisis and recession that made the fiscal situation worse as revenue decreased and automatic government outlays increased to counter the downturn. We have taken many steps to reestablish fiscal responsibility, from instituting a statutory pay-as-you-go rule for spending to go through the budget line by line, looking for outdated, ineffective, or duplicative programs to cut or reform. Importantly, we enacted the Affordable Care Act, which will not only provide Americans with more affordable choices and freedom from insurance company abuses, but will also reduce our budget deficits by more than $1 trillion over the next 2 decades. As economic growth was beginning to take hold last year, I took further steps to put our nation on a fiscally sustainable path that would strengthen the foundation of the economy for years to come. In April of 2011, I put forward my framework for shared prosperity and shared fiscal responsibility that built on the 2012 budget to identify $4 trillion in deficit reduction. During negotiations over extending the debt ceiling in the summer, I presented to congressional Republicans another balanced plan to achieve $4 trillion in the deficit reduction. Finally, in September, I sent my plan for economic growth and deficit reduction through the Joint Select Committee on the Deficit Reduction, which detailed a way to achieve $3 trillion in deficit reduction on top of the $1 trillion already achieved in the Budget Control Act of 2011 that I signed into law the previous month. I also made sure that this plan covered the cost of the American Jobs Act, a set of bipartisan common-sense proposals designed to put more people back to work, put more money in the pockets of the middle class, and do so without adding a dime to the deficit at a time when it was clear that global events we're slowing the economic recovery and our ability to create more jobs. Unfortunately, Republicans in Congress blocked both our deficit reduction measures and almost every part of the American Jobs Act for the simple reason that they were unwilling to ask the wealthiest Americans to pay their fair share. In the year ahead, I will continue to pursue policies that will shore up our economy and our fiscal situation. Together with the deficit reduction I signed into law this past year, the budget will cut the deficit by $4 trillion over the next decade. This will put the country on a course to a level of deficits below 3% of the GDP by the end of the decade, and will also allow us to stabilize the federal debt relative to the size of the economy. To get there, this budget contains a number of steps to put us on a fiscally sustainable path. First, this budget implements the tight discretionary spending caps that I signed into law in the Budget Control Act of 2011. These caps will generate approximately $1 trillion in deficit reduction over the next decade. Building on reductions we already have made, this will result in a cut in discretionary spending of $42 billion since 2010, when higher levels of federal spending were essential to provide a jump start to the economy. Meeting the spending targets in this budget meant some very difficult choices, reforming, consolidating, or freezing programs where we could, cutting programs that were not effective or essential, and even some that were, but not now, unaffordable, and precisely targeting our investments. Every department will feel the impact of these reductions as they cut programs or tighten their belts to free up more resources for areas critical to economic growth. And throughout the entire government, we will continue our efforts to make programs and services work better and cost less, using competition and high standards to get the most from the grants we award, getting rid of excess federal real estate, and saving billions of dollars by cutting overhead and the administrative cost. Second, this budget begins the process of implementing my new defense strategy that reconfigures our force to meet the challenges of the coming decade. Over the past 3 years, we have made historic investments in our troops and their capabilities, military families, and veterans. After a decade of war, we are at an inflection point. American troops have left Iraq, and we are undergoing a transition in Afghanistan so Afghans can assume more responsibility. We have debilitated al-Qaeda's leadership, putting that terrorist network on the path to defeat. At the same time, we have to renew our economic strength here at home, which is the foundation of our strength in the world, and that includes putting our fiscal house in order. To ensure that our defense budget is driven by a clear strategy that reflects our national interest, I directed the Secretary of Defense and military leadership to undertake a comprehensive strategic review. I presented the results of the review, reflecting my guidance and the full support of our nation's military leadership, at the Pentagon on January 5th. There are several key elements to this new strategy. To sustain a global reach, we will strengthen our presence in the Asia-Pacific region and continue vigilance in the Middle East. We will invest in critical partnerships and alliances, including NATO, which has demonstrated time and again, most recently in Libya, that it is a force multiplier. Looking past Iraq and Afghanistan to future threats, the military no longer will be seized for large-scale, prolonged stability operations. The Department of Defense will focus modernization on emerging threats and sustaining efforts to get rid of outdated Cold War-era systems so that we can invest in the capabilities we need for the future, including intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities. My administration will continue to enhance capabilities related to counterterrorism and countering weapons of mass destruction. And we will also maintain the ability to operate in environments where adversaries try to deny us access. And we will keep faith with those who serve by giving priority to our wounded warriors, service members' mental health, and the well-being of military families. Adapting our forces to this new strategy will entail investing in high-priority programs such as unmanned surveillance aircraft and upgraded tactical vehicles. It will mean terminating unnecessary and low-priority programs such as the C-27 aircraft airlift, and a new welfare satellite and maintaining programs such as the Joint Strike Fighter at a reduced level. All told, reductions in the growth of defense spending will save $487 billion over the next 10 years. In addition, the end of our military activities in Iraq and the wind down of operations in Afghanistan will mean that the country will spend 24% less on overseas contingency operations, OCO, this year than it did last year, saving $30 billion. I also am proposing a multi-year cap on OCO spending so that we fully realize the dividends of this change in policy. Third, I believe that in our country everyone must shoulder their fair share, especially those who have benefited most from our economy. In the United States of America, a teacher, a nurse, or a construction worker who earns $50,000 a year should not pay taxes at a higher rate than somebody making $50 million a year. That is wrong. It is wrong for Warren Buffett's secretary to pay a higher tax rate than Warren Buffett. This is not about class warfare. This is about the nation's welfare. This is about making fair choices that benefit not just the people who have done fantastically well over the last few decades, but that also benefit the middle class, those fighting to get into the middle class and the economy as a whole. In the budget, I reiterate my opposition to permanently extending the Bush tax cuts for families making more than $250,000 a year, and my opposition to a more generous estate tax than we had in 2009, benefiting only the very largest estates. These policies were unfair and unaffordable when they were passed, and they remain so today. I will push for their expiration in the coming year. I also propose to eliminate special tax breaks for oil and gas companies, preferred treatment for those who purchase corporate jets, tax rules that give a larger percentage deduction to the wealthiest 2% than to middle-class families for itemized deductions, and a loophole that allows some of the wealthiest money managers in the country to pay only 15% on the millions of dollars they earn. And I support tax reform that observes the Buffett rule, that no household making more than $1 million annually should pay a smaller share of its income taxes than middle-class families pay. Fourth, to build on the work we have done to reduce health care costs through the Affordable Care Act, I am proposing more than $360 billion in reforms to Medicare, Medicaid, and other health programs over 10 years. The goal of these reforms is to make these critical programs more effective and efficient, and to help make our health care system rewards high-quality medicine. What it does not do, and what I will not support, are efforts to turn Medicare into a voucher or Medicaid into a block grant. Doing so would weaken both programs and break the promise that we have made to American seniors, people with disabilities, and low-income families, a promise I am committed to keeping. Finally, to address other looming long-term challenges to our fiscal health, I have put forward a wide range of mandatory savings. These include reductions in agricultural subsidies, changes in federal employee retirement and health benefits, reforms to the unemployment insurance system and the Postal Service, and new efforts to provide a better return to taxpayers from mineral development drawn from the plan I presented to the Joint Select Committee on Deficit Reduction. These mandatory proposals would save $217 billion over the next decade. Reining in our deficits is not an end in of itself. It is necessary It is a necessary step to rebuilding a strong foundation so our economy can grow and create jobs. That is our ultimate goal. And as we tighten our belts by cutting, consolidating, and reforming programs, we also must invest in the areas that will be critical to giving every American a fair shot at success and creating an economy that is built to last. That starts with taking action now to strengthen our economy and boost job creation. We need to finish the work we started last year by extending the payroll tax cut and unemployment benefits for the rest of the year. We also need to take additional measures to put more people back to work. That is why I introduced the American Jobs Act last year, and why I will continue to put forward many of the ideas it contained, as well as additional measures to put people back to work by rebuilding our infrastructure, providing businesses tax incentives to invest and hire, and giving states aid to rehire teachers and first responders. We also know that education and lifelong learning will be critical for anyone trying to compete for the jobs of the future. That is why I will continue to make education a national mission. What one learns will have a big impact on what he or she earns. The unemployment rate for Americans with a college degree or more is only about half the national average, and the incomes of college graduates are twice as high as those without a high school diploma. When I took office, I set the goal for America to have the highest proportion of college graduates in the world by 2020. To reach that goal, we increased the maximum annual Pell Grant by more than $900 to help nearly 10 million needy students afford a college education. The 2013 budget continues that commitment and provides the necessary resources to sustain the maximum award of $5,635. In this budget, I also propose a series of new proposals to help families with the cost of college, including making permanent the American Opportunity Tax Credit, a partially refundable tax credit worth up to $10,000 per student over 4 years of college, and rewarding colleges and universities that act responsibly in setting tuition, providing the best value and serving needy students well. To help our students graduate with the skills they will need for the jobs of the future, we are continuing our effort to prepare 100,000 science and math teachers over the next decade. To improve our elementary and secondary schools, we are continuing our commitment to the Race to the Top initiative that rewards the most innovative and effective ways to raise standards, recruit and retain good teachers, and raise student achievement. My budget invests $850 million in this effort, which already has been expended to cover early learning and individual school districts. And to prepare our workers for the jobs of tomorrow, we need to turn our unemployment system into re-employment system. That includes giving more community colleges the resources they need to become community career centers, places that teach skills that businesses are looking for right now, from data management to high-tech manufacturing. Once our students and workers gain the skills they need for the jobs of the future, we also need to make sure those jobs end up in America. In today's high-tech global economy, that means the United States must be the best place in the world to take an idea from the drawing board to the factory floor to the shelves of each store. In this budget, we are sustaining our level of investment in non-defense research and development, R&D, even as overall spending declines, thereby keeping us on track to double R&D funding in the key R&D agencies. We are supporting research at the National Institutes of Health that will accelerate the translation of new discoveries in biomedical science into new therapies and cures, along with initiatives at the Food and Drug Administration that will speed up the approval of new medicines. We make important investments in the science and research needed to tackle the most important environmental challenges of our time, and we are investing in the fields as varied as cybersecurity, nanotechnology, and advanced manufacturing. This budget also puts an emphasis on the basic research that leads to the breakthroughs of tomorrow, which increasingly is no longer being conducted by the private sector, as well as helping inventors bring their innovations from laboratory to market. This budget reflects the importance of safeguarding our environment while strengthening our economy. We do not have to choose between having clean air and clean water and growing the economy. By conserving iconic American landscapes, restoring significant ecosystems from the Everglades to the Great Lakes, and achieving measurable improvements in water and air quality, we are working with communities to protect the natural resources that serve as the engines of their local economies. Moreover, this budget continues my administration's commitment to developing America's diverse, clean sources of energy. The budget eliminates unwarranted tax breaks for oil companies while extending key tax initiatives to spur investments in clean energy manufacturing and renewable energy production. The budget also invests in R&D to catalyze the next generation of clean energy technologies. These investments will help us achieve our goal in doubling the share of electricity from clean energy sources by 2035. By promoting American leadership in advanced vehicle manufacturing, including funding to encourage greater use of natural gas in the transportation sector, the budget will help us reach our goal of reducing oil imports by 1/3 by 2025 and position the United States to become the first country to have 1 million electric vehicles on the road by 2015. We also are working to decrease the amount of energy used by commercial and industrial buildings by 20% to complement our ongoing efforts to improving the efficiency of the residential sector. And we will work with the private sector, utilities, and states to increase the energy productivity of American industries while investing in the innovative process and materials that can dramatically reduce energy use. It is also time for government to do its part to help make it easier for entrepreneurs, investors, and workers to grow their businesses and thrive in the global economy. I am calling on Congress to immediately begin work on corporate tax reform that will close loopholes, lower the overall rate, encourage investment here at home, simplify taxes for America's small businesses, and not add a dime to the deficit. Moreover, to further assist these companies, we need a comprehensive reorganization of the parts of the federal government that help businesses grow and sell their products abroad. If given consolidation authority, which presidents had for most of the 20th century, I will propose to consolidate 6 agencies into one department, saving money and making it easier for all companies, especially small businesses, get the help they need to thrive in the world economy. Finally, this budget advances the national security interests of the United States, including the security of the American people, the prosperity and trade that creates American jobs, and support for universal values around the world. It increases funding for the diplomatic efforts that strengthen the alliances and partnerships that improve international cooperation in meeting shared challenges, open new markets to American exports, and promote development. It invests in the intelligence and homeland security capabilities to detect, prevent, and defend against terrorist attacks against our country. As we implement our new defense strategy, my administration will invest in the systems and capabilities we need that our armed forces are configured to meet the challenges of the coming decade. We will continue to invest in improving global health and food security so that we address the root causes of conflict and security threats. And we will keep faith with our men and women in uniform, their families, and veterans who have served their nation. These proposals will take us a long way towards strengthening the middle class and giving families the sense of security they have been missing for too long. But in the end, building an economy that works for everyone will require all of us to take responsibility. Parents will need to take greater responsibility for their children's education. Homeowners will have to take more responsibility when it comes to buying a house or taking out a loan. Businesses will take responsibility for doing right by their workers and our country. And those of us in public service will need to keep finding ways to make government more efficient and more effective. Understanding and honoring the obligations we have to ourselves and to each other is what has made this country great. We look out for each other, pull together, and do our part. But Americans also deserve to know that their hard work will be rewarded. This budget is a step in the right direction, and I hope it will serve as a roadmap for how we can grow the economy, create jobs, and give Americans everywhere the security they deserve. Signed, Barack Obama, the White House, February 13, 2012.
Referred to the Committee on Appropriations and ordered printed. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until approximately 4:45 p.m. today.
So the House is recessed after the reading clerk read a message from the President. Members will return